incredible American hero whose courage and leadership embody the very best of our nation's warriors. Staff Sergeant Clinton Romesha, Medal of Honor recipient, known to his fellow soldiers as Ro, and author of the Red Platoon book, a story of true American valor. Also a New York Times bestseller. Many of you also recognize him or may recognize him from the Netflix series Medal of Honor. Clint earned our nation's highest award for his military actions and heroic actions during the Battle of Kamdesh in Afghanistan on October the 3rd, 2009. On that day, outnumbered nearly 7-1 by enemy fighters and wounded by shrapnel, he continued to lead from the front, rallying reinforcements, directing support, and engaging enemy positions. His extraordinary bravery and leadership were instrumental in not only repelling the attack, but saved countless lives and preventing the outpost from being overran. After more than a decade of service to our nation, including deployments to Iraq, Afghanistan, Clint transitioned back to civilian life in North Dakota, to Minot, North Dakota. In addition to his career, he and his wife Kelly are raising 6 children, like if he didn't have enough to do. He's remained deeply committed to supporting the veteran community. Clint is also a previous home recipient from our organization, Military Warriors Support Foundation. But he also serves as a dedicated ambassador, giving back to other veteran families, other veteran organizations, such as Sportsmen for Warriors, Heroes Linked, Patriot Project, and American Warrior Partnership. Wonder where he finds the time to do all this, right? Please join me in giving a warm welcome to an American hero and Medal of Honor recipient, Staff Sergeant Clinton Romesha.
Thank you guys very much for that very warm welcome. What a great morning it is to be down here at BattleCon, bright and early in the morning. Hopefully you guys didn't spend too much time at the slot machines last night. So it's a great honor and a privilege to be here. I will tell you this up front, what this does for me, you don't truly understand. Receiving the medal always comes with a high price and a lot of weight. And these moments where I can share helps me more than you guys will ever realize. I grew up in a tiny town in Northern California, right on the Oregon-Nevada border. My dad was actually a heavy equipment operator for Washoe County up by Reno. But I grew up in this tiny town. We raised alfalfa. We had dairy cows. You know, I grew up in a world where, you know, every day you got done doing something, you look back and you seen what you built, what you created. I've got a special spot in my heart for the skills and the trades. I said, I get to brag every day that I graduated in the top 15 of the 14 kids that were in my senior class. Because I grew up in a town of 100 people and I went to school in a town of 500. But like I said, growing up in that environment, I came from a history of military service. My grandfather served World War II. He was a combat engineer, survived Normandy Beach landing, Battle of the Bulge. My dad was an infantry guy, did 2 tours in Vietnam. My oldest brother initially joined the Army, then went Air Force, recently retired about 3 years ago now. My second oldest brother joined the Marines. He did 4 years, got out. So when I graduated high school and growing up, I knew I wanted to serve. But like I said, growing up, it wasn't ever like a prerequisite for the Romesha family. Like my dad and my grandfather never pushed us toward military service. it was always that understanding that you got to give back more than you take. You know, being born here in America, being part of this great country, we've been afforded so many opportunities that very few around the world have just by being born here. So that was always impressed upon me growing up, was to give back more than you take. Said when I got luggage from my senior graduation present, I realized it was time to move on and do what's next in life. But as I graduated, I was 17 years old, and I'd already talked to the Army recruiter, had everything drawn up, but since I was 17, I had to get my parents' permission. Said I remember the stories my grandfather and my dad used to share about their time in service. And it was always about their battle buddies. It was always about the camaraderie. It was always about the shenanigans. They never did talk about their time in combat. You know, that was partially a different generation. You know, when you put that in the back of your mind, you just go on with life after you take the uniform off. So when I went to my dad, and I told him, hey, got the contract all written up. You just got to sign for me. My dad kind of just looked at me and said, no, I'm not going to do it. Said in my mind, I'm like, oh man, I'm the youngest of the three boys. Dad is just literally trying to stick me around for another summer of free labor because my birthday wasn't until August. But he very quickly followed up and he's like, look, Clint, right now it's 1999 when I graduated. Dad's like, right now there's not a lot going on in the world. We're at relative peace. Maybe not tomorrow and maybe not in 20 years. If you decide to put that uniform on, you might have to go and do and see things that no one should have to go do and see. Said I was 17 years old. I didn't have a clue what he was really talking about because you already think you know everything at that point. So I was frustrated, and so then I waited. So when I turned 18 in August, signed up and I shipped off for basic training in September 12th of 1999. Right away, I realized, like so many veterans, you end up joining for one reason, you end up serving for another one. Said I joined because I was tired of smelling like bag bomb every morning after milking cows before going to school. I was tired of digging fence posts. I wanted to go see more than that little footprint of Northern California, Northern Nevada, where I grew up at. You know, figured I'd get some free college money, do it for 4 years. Like, seriously, I thought if I could join the military, make it through 4 years, maybe make corporal and not go to Leavenworth, that would be like the most highest achievement I could ever make. So in a million years, did I never think I'd ever meet a Medal of Honor recipient, let alone be one. And I can tell you to this day, for the actions on October 3rd, I still tell you I didn't do anything special. I had 50 other guys with me that day. Had 8 that gave up their lives so I could be here. If it wasn't for them, I'd be nothing. And even though I get selected to wear the medal, it represents more than just me. All of those veterans that have served, we started on the same path. Said unlike my father and my grandfather, when we served for the global war of terrorism, everyone got to raise that right hand and say, I will go and do. It was all volunteer force. I remember every time I came back from any deployment, I always came home to cheering crowds and Americans that really appreciated what we were doing. And I'll have to say this, it was because of the generation of the Vietnam guys. Because when they came home, they didn't get that. They came home to people spitting on them, calling them the most derogatory things. And they made sure that didn't happen to my generation. So if you're a Vietnam vet in the crowd, if you got a family member that served in Vietnam, from the bottom of my heart to them, please let them know, welcome home, and thank you for your service, your sacrifice, and to make sure I didn't get treated that way. That's something our generation has to make sure we give to the next. I ended up, like I said, doing 2 deployments to Iraq, 1 to Afghanistan. Said I didn't ever want to make the military my career. It's just something that just felt natural to me. There was no better feeling than training up a new platoon of guys and taking them overseas, that camaraderie, that teamwork. Like I said, we joined for one reason, we end up serving for another. And for me, I ended up doing almost 12 years because I got to serve with some of the best men I've ever got to know. Those guys that still to this day, if I'm in trouble, I could call them at any time of day. I call them my 2 a.m. buddies. You can call them at 2 a.m. and they're going to show up. They're just going to ask you, where do they need to be and what are we doing? You don't find that anywhere else in military service. So, like I said, 2 deployments to Iraq, going to my 3rd one to Afghanistan. Knew this one was going to be a little different. We knew the location we were going to, this combat outpost Keating, literally set at the bottom of a valley surrounded by mountains on all 4 sides. We knew that logistically it was going to be a tough location to get it in and out of because the road that previously connected it to coalition forces, about 5 years before we showed up there, the reason the outpost was named Keating was because of Lieutenant Keating was trying to move a military vehicle to and from that outpost down to the higher headquarters, and it had rolled over into the river and killed him. So Ben Keating was kind of the initial sacrifice of this outpost. Said as it sat there, what was supposed to be kind of a quick stop, going to push north into Afghanistan, where this outpost ended up going, ended up becoming more permanent because as we split kind of forces, we weren't going to continue the push north, but we're also not going to give up terrain once we get it. So like I said, that outpost had been there for almost 6 years. And we had the benefit of guys like Sergeant Joshua Kirk, who was a 173rd Airborne guy that was just operating in that battle space right before our deployment. Came to our platoon as we were training the new guys, and Kirk was the one that was telling us, he's like, you guys don't understand how extreme this place is going to be, how vertical the mountains will be, how dedicated the enemy is, because unlike Iraq, like these guys would go toe-to-toe with you. They'd sit there and fix you and flank you and do all this stuff, just like we did as American soldiers. And I remember the first night getting there, because the only way in and out was by helicopter. Like I said, the nearest coalition forces were 30 kilometers away. And you only flew in on the darkest nights with no illumination, no moonlight, no nothing. Just because with those Chinooks coming in, they were such an easy target going into that valley. The first night getting there, I remember coming off the Chinook, coming out the back ramp, trying to get oriented on the landing zone, link it up with the new unit. Had my night vision goggles on. And if you've never worn night vision goggles, the one thing, no matter how dim the illumination is, you can always pick up the horizon. Between the land and the sky and the sun on the backside of the world, you can always see that kind of horizon. I just remember scanning out real quick and not noticing that and thinking to myself, I probably need to get these night vision goggles purged or something. Might need a little tweak. I'll take them to the arms room guy in the morning. It wasn't until the next morning when I woke up, looked outside for the first time in the daylight, and realized I just didn't look up high enough. And 360 degrees around us, the mountain went straight up. And the initial thought was, who the heck would have picked a spot like this? As far as defensible positions go, this was the total opposite of what you'd look for. Like I said, I'm old school, not big in technology. I don't like emailing or anything like that. I love handwritten notes. So I'd always write letters back home. And I remember my granddad had passed away by this point, but I was writing Grandma Smith. And I just remember sending her a quick letter when I first got there that said, hey, we're in country. The guys' morales are high. We got 12 months over here. Everybody's looking good. We'll be home soon. This is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, because every morning I get to look up at these mountains and it reminds me of the Sierra Nevadas, the Warner Mountain Range where I grew up. And I sent it off, and a few weeks later, Grandma sends me a letter back. Just the first opening line was, what the hell are you doing? Look it up. Everybody knows you take the high ground. My grandma knew from that one statement that this location was kind of ridiculous. But that was the impressive thing, that was my 3rd combat deployment, but I was there with kids. I call them kids still to this day. Blake Jones was 19 years old. Copus had just turned 20. Stephen Mace was 18. Like, these were young men, still wet behind the ears, first deployment ever. And like I said, even Grandma knew that location was ridiculous. But when I watched these young men get there, instead of bitch crying, complaining, woe is me, they embraced it. And one of the things that helped that is in our barracks, written on one of the beams in the rafters, a previous unit had written the phrase, "It never gets better." And you can think of that, man, oh, it's never going to get better because this place sucks. No, those young men took that phrase. They said they stenciled it on their T-shirts. Every time something would happen, they would respond with, "It never gets better," because they had the mentality knowing they couldn't change their situation in that moment. The only thing they could change is their attitude and mentality. So it can never get any better because they made every day the best day of their life possible. And they led that way. And they showed me something. Like I said, I was 10 years in. I was a staff sergeant. I had some leadership under my belt. But yet I learned something from those young men about that mental toughness and to understand some things. You're in situations that are out of your control, but the one thing you can always control is that attitude, that outlook. And they did. Said we were there for about 3 months. Typical day. Said we'll normally get attacked in the morning, attacked at night, but on average, we'd at least get in one firefight a day. Some was sporadic small arms fire with some AK coming in. Some was more coordinated. You know, the logistics of the place, like we got one hot meal every 3 days. We got a shower once a week. Because helicopters were the only thing that could come in and out, the priorities went to like ammunition, fuel, water, food, and then the creature comforts would come later. Most of the time, we didn't really have power to run air conditioning or anything like that. No matter where you stood outside, you knew you were always kind of in range of the enemy. And for 3 months, we operated that way. And life was good. We'd gotten the word, though, that we were going to finally tear down that place. We were going to relocate because tactically it didn't make sense to be there. So we were on the verge of leaving. 2 weeks away, in fact, that we were finally going to get out of there. But at 06 on October 3rd, bright and early in the morning, said, and it was not uncommon to be attacked at that time. In fact, it was so common that we just normally dub it our Taliban alarm clock when you'd hear fire coming in. All of a sudden, things cooked off. The night before, I was sergeant of the guard, so I had just bedded down to get some sleep before my next shift. So as I woke, I could hear the gunfight going on. I didn't understand really the situation in that moment. I could just tell there was something different about this. Because typically when we'd get attacked, your defensive positions, you want to go into what's called the cyclic rate of fire right away. You want to send more bullets at them than they're sending at you. So you can maintain that fire superiority, get the initiative, and then figure out what's going on. Like I said, unfortunately, waking up, powering the radio on, listening to it, all of a sudden I could tell all that fire was all incoming, drowning out our outgoing. And as my radio powered all the way up, immediately every defensive position was calling up overwhelming enemy fire. We need ammo resupply. We need close air support. We need artillery. Every position we had on the outpost. Said our platoon, red platoon, that morning we were tasked with the defense of the perimeter. Blue platoon, our sister platoon, they were tasked with trying to feed ammo to all the defensive positions. Said immediately upon first contact, though, we get the first report that Kevin Thompson, one of our mortarmen, is hit. And I remember in those 3 months kind of leading up to this attack, I would sit there with Sergeant Gallegos and Sergeant Kirk and Lieutenant Bunderman, and we would talk about, hey, if we were going to attack this place, what would we do? All of a sudden, we found ourselves in the firefight exactly how we planned it. It would be suppress the mortar position, suppress the gun trucks, and then start pushing in and isolating off. Like I said, told right away that Kevin Thompson was hit. The mortars were down. Typically, when something goes wrong, it's a multitude of things. Our closest artillery support was out of Fob Bostic, 30 kilometers away, meaning so if we called artillery, it was going to be plus or minus 800 meters on the initial correction. So to attempt to call artillery, and about 8 football fields, that artillery could fall anywhere. You didn't quite know where it was going to go. And when you're in the bottom of a valley, that makes it a little dicey to sit there and want to try to call that. Just a few weeks before our attack, a lovely soldier named Bo Bergdahl decided to leave his outpost. So the normal air coverage would have, kind of keeping eyes on us over the night and being able to provide support in about 20 minutes, had gotten pulled south. So we knew close air support was going to be over an hour away and would have to wait for that. My troop commander, who should have been there that day, Stoney Portis, had just taken over the unit and actually flown up to OP Fritchie, the observation post that just sat south of us, to do some inventory stuff. Well, this helicopter the night before got shot at, and the pilots wouldn't bring him back to us. So my lieutenant, Lieutenant Bunderman, first time he was ever deployed, brand new lieutenant, was put as the on-the-scene commander the night before, and now has found himself running what ends up being the deadliest battle on coalition forces for the global war on terrorism. So that immediately things went from bad to worse. You get told Kevin Thompson's hit. At that time, Sergeant Kirk's trying to take a team out to the west to push out there to reinforce the western side of the outpost with Sergeant Gallegos. As he pushes out and gets to the entry control point, Sergeant Kirk gets hit with an RPG. Goes down. We had about 35 Afghan National Army that was attached to us that was supposed to hold down the eastern side of the camp. Well, on first contact, what did they do? They basically, most of them threw their weapons down and left, leaving the whole eastern side of the camp exposed and open. So the enemy in that 3 months had really been doing their research. As I talked about Blue Platoon, their job was to reinforce us with resupply us with ammunition. They had a sniper trained on Blue Platoon barracks door. So as soon as the first team tried to push out to get to the ammo supply point to resupply, a sniper was trained on that door, so when Scusa first exit out, he goes down. This is all happening within like the first 30 minutes. Things just start going from bad to worse. Trying to get an assessment, trying to figure out what's going on next. Realizing close air support is going to be a ways out. The quick reaction force, we didn't realize there was weather in between the valleys. They were having trouble to come in and reinforce us. And because the enemy had us surrounded on all four sides in the high ground, there was just no way to bring in any sort of medevac. So we knew we'd have to just hang on. Within about the first hour, the enemy had breached our side of the wire, pushed in, and started cutting us off. I remember going into the barracks at one point, realizing something needs to happen, and that's when I found Specialist Gregory. He had a machine gun. I grabbed him and about the last 200 rounds that he had left, and we tried to push over to the west to support Gallegos, because there was about 5 guys stuck at a Humvee. It was Larson, it was Carter, it was Gallegos, it was Mace, and it was Sergeant Martin. We pushed over, looking out toward the west, using this generator to kind of give us cover. Gregory loaded me up the first 100 rounds, and I remember just looking out, and on the hillsides, up in the mountains, just nothing but enemy fighters all over. So I started engaging and calling up Gallegos, telling him, hey brother, if you can move, you need to move now. Try to give you some covering fire. And he just kept calling back. He's like, brother, you can't bring enough. Can't bring enough fire, we can't move, we're pinned down. I said, we went through that first 100 rounds. Gregory loads me with the next set of 100 rounds. It's when the enemy had outflanked us to the right. Didn't notice them breaching the gate. So fixated to the west instead of the north. They had been able to push in. They set up an RPG team, and luckily, they'd shot it low, and the generator took most of the impact, blowing me on Gregory, knocking me off there. I remember grabbing Gregory, picking him up, dusting him off, and I told him just run back to cover. Loaded up the last belt of 100, went back to work. Just about as I was losing the rest of my ammunition, I called up Gallegos and told him, if you guys can move, you need to go now. And that was one of those moments. It was just heartbreaking because I knew if our roles were reversed, Gallegos was going to do everything to help me out. And it felt hopeless because I was out of ammo. The battle position we had could no longer hold it. And I was essentially telling him, hey, I got to get out of here, and I'm hoping you're going to hold on. And I remember he called me back after I told him I got to displace, and he just said, don't worry, brother, we'll be here when you get here. That was one of those moments where it's just how much trust and love you have in someone else, knowing And he knew I would come get him, because I knew he'd come get me. We got back to the barracks. I said things just kept going from bad to worse. We finally started getting some of the close air support in. But unfortunately, I said, Lieutenant Bunderman, said, brand new lieutenant, he made some gutsy calls that day. He had to make the call Alamo position, meaning anybody that could hear that needed to isolate and suck back down. And basically, we could only hold the aid station, Red Platoon Barracks, and the Tactical Operations Center was the only 3 buildings we could control. Taliban had started burning down most of the rest of the barracks and overran most of it. Bunderman made that call knowing he was going to isolate about 9 guys. Whether it would get to him again or not, who knew? But he knew we were stretched so thin and the enemy kind of had the initiative that if we didn't tuck in tight and hold on, we weren't going to be able to last. Literally at that point, we had guys just pointing weapons at doors in the barracks. And if you weren't speaking English, wearing an American uniform, you were going to get shot coming through a door. That's how tight everything was. And I just remember having that moment. Like I said, I don't remember being scared about getting shot or not coming home or dying or any of that. That didn't even cross my mind. What scared the ever-living crap out of me was what was happening to everybody else. So at this point, we'd been cut off. We no longer had any idea if Gallegos and them were still alive. We had about 9 guys unaccounted for. And my biggest fear was the Taliban's tactic is they could get the body of an American soldier. That was a huge propaganda thing. And I remember telling us before going overseas that we're all going over, but we're all not coming back alive. That's just the nature of war, the nature of combat. You want to bring everybody home. You want to bring them home alive, back to their family. But that's why combat is glorifying, or combat is horrifying, not glorifying. We went over to do very bad things to very bad people that want to do the same to us. But I never thought in a million years that I wouldn't bring everybody home. And like I said, what scared me was the idea to go to face a Gold Star family and tell them I couldn't even bring their son's body back. With that, I remember going into the Tactical Operations Center where Bunderman was, and I told him, hey, sir, I got an idea. Like I said, luckily I'd been able to work with Lieutenant Bunderman for about a year at this point. We'd built a lot of trust together, and we had a lot of faith in each other. And he asked me, well, what are you thinking, Sergeant Rowe? And I said, hey, we're going to take this bitch back. So the first thing we got to do is we're almost out of ammo. We got to get to that ammo supply point. We got to capture that. We don't have bullets. We can't fight. Next thing we got to do is we got to shut the front gate because the enemy just keeps squeezing in on us. Because we can't stop them from coming in. We can't maneuver. And most importantly, the third thing is we got to go find these guys. Like I said, we'd been isolated, cut off from most of them for almost 6 hours. No idea if they're there, not, alive, dead, whatever. And that's when Bunderman just looked at me, and it was one of those moments where I was so glad we had that trust in each other, and he said, okay, go, do it. I remember going back into the barracks, and one of the most proudest things I ever got to see, when I walked into that barracks, and all I said is, I need a group of volunteers. They had no idea what I was going to ask them next. And I had 5 guys that stood up: Raz, Danley, Delaney, Jones, and Miller. I told them the plan. They were going to go capture the ammo supply point, shut the front gate, and get our guys. I'm essentially asking these guys to go counterattack an enemy force that outnumbered us 8-1, that had the high ground, that had us outgunned, had us outpositioned. Told them they didn't have to go. And each one of them just looked at me and said, we'll follow you anywhere. And what a proud moment. They had the trust in me to come up with a cockamamie idea and the belief. And somehow we got to that ammo supply point, pushed the enemy off that, started feeding ammo back to the rest of the platoon, shut the front gate, pushed the enemy out, and most importantly, got up and started finding our fallen heroes. Was able to find Griffin and bring him back. I was able to find Sergeant Martin and bring him back. We found Gallegos, brought him back. Mace was very badly wounded. They brought him back to the aid station, was treating him. But it got to the point where we couldn't find Sergeant Hart. And that's one of those things I never thought about until I served in combat. If you want to know something about love, go to war with your brothers to your left and right. I seen so much love that day, and it's just so hard to put in words. Said Mace had been hit and very badly wounded, left untreated for almost 6 hours without any medical attention. They were able to bring him back, brought him to the aid station. Our aid station was very rudimental. Didn't have hardly anything, but what they did have was a direct blood transfusion kit for some reason, not normally a piece of equipment your medics would have. And they started putting out the radio call, anybody with AB positive blood, come to the aid station. And I watched guys rotate off the front line, go to that aid station, give Mace a unit of blood to keep him going. And instead of like donating your blood where you get a cookie and an orange juice and half a day off work, those guys came right back out to the front line and continued to fight. I watched guys like Sergeant Larson, Chambers, Nebraska. He was strong safety for a junior college before he joined the Army. Larson was light and fast. Because we couldn't find Hart's body and was just devastated that the enemy had taken it, Sergeant Larson left his M4, his Kevlar, and his body armor 3 times and did the bullet dance, running as fast around that outpost as he could, dodging enemy fire to just hopefully find Sergeant Hart. And unfortunately, 3 times he didn't. Said we thought the worst, that he was gone. Then after about 15 hours, just as the sun was setting, the QRF had finally touched down just north of the mountain, was pushing down on us. So they were pushing through our wire, making their sweep. They finally found Sergeant Hart. And after 15 hours, the men from Black Knight Troop 361 Cav finally had 100% accountability on all personnel from Combat Outpost Keating. As the dust settled, the Army deemed that place indefensible. Should have never been there. Said it was just kind of a mistake. I look at it this way. I watched 50 Americans, 2 Latvian soldiers that were attached with us, fight off a Taliban force of almost 400 fighters that had the higher ground, had us outgunned, had us outnumbered. And even though we lost a little terrain, we never lost that outpost. And I watched 50 amazing Americans defend the indefensible. I'm so proud to be part of that. And to tell you that if it wasn't for those men, I wouldn't be here today. Said I transitioned out of the Army. I went up to North Dakota chasing oil fields. I put all that in the back of my mind and just went on with life. I had no idea I was ever put in for the medal. In fact, I was told I might have gotten put in for a Distinguished Service Cross. I'd been out of the Army for almost 2 years before one day I was sitting there. I was working the oil fields up North Dakota, sitting in my company truck. My phone rings. It's a number I don't recognize. I answer it, and all of a sudden I hear, "Hey, this is Colonel Davis, G1 from the Pentagon." My first thought is, oh shit, what did I do wrong? Like statute of limitations should be up. But he says, "Hey, we need you to come to DC. We got something to tell you." And like I said, in the back of my mind, I thought it might have been something with that day. I didn't quite know. I figured maybe they downgraded it to a Silver Star, but whatever. I just wanted to get on with my life. So I get to DC, and that's when they set me down, and they tell me, "Hey, you've been recommended for upgrade. Short of the president signing your award, you'll be receiving the Medal of Honor." Again, it was, for me, I just kind of looked around. I'm like, for what? I didn't do anything special. I truly believe you could have replaced me, and any other red-blooded American would have stepped up that day. Because I know it is in our DNA that when things get tough, that's when we rise up the most. That's when we shine the brightest. That is something the world counts on when they look toward the United States. When things get bad, when things get terrible, that's when we do the best. Said it's a privilege to, like I said, to be able to share this story. Said when I put that medal on, it comes with a heavy weight and a heavy price. But I get to disperse a little bit of that weight on each and every one of you, hearing about things that Larson did, that Bunderman did, the Sergeant Rasmussen did, the sacrifice that Gallegos made, and Kirk, and Scusa, and Griffin, and Sergeant Martin, and Kevin Thompson. He said, I put my head in the sand. I said, I got out. I put all that in the back of the box, telling myself I'd never forget. But yet, how selfish was I? The guys I worked with in the oil field never knew those guys' name. But now I have an opportunity to share them with each and every one of you. So we fast forward through time, though. Like I said, never in a million years did I think I'd be a recipient. And I've been given a blessing and a privilege, and something that also comes partially as a curse. That it's not given out when things have gone right. The medal's given out when things have gone horribly wrong. But as I found my way later in life, I have these opportunities to let people know. I'm not just those names, but how many other great Americans we have that serve day to day, often that never even wore the uniform. I've had the privilege to know Ken for quite a few years now. I got introduced to Ken and Military Warriors Support Foundation through another buddy of mine, David. I was going, even after receiving the medal, and you think you got things figured out, I was going through a tough time in my life. I was going through my first divorce, trying to get reset. And it's so hard for veterans to accept things. They had reached out to me for a house donation, and I thought, why me? I don't deserve that. Like, I'll be all right. I've received the medal, I've got opportunities, but it was stepping in and realizing that sometimes, you do struggle. Most veterans are doing well most of the time, but it's understanding that you never did anything alone in the military. You should never do anything alone outside the military. And Ken and David stepped in for me. And that was the first time receiving that house in Minot, North Dakota. And I told Ken this. That was the first time I had a home since I left my home at 18 years old. And now I've been able to help raise my 6 kids there. Me and my wife's 6 kids. Got to see the next chapter in life. Got to see my oldest daughter out in college, out in UND. Our oldest son, he's going to trade school for HVAC, heating and cooling. It's because of great opportunities and great organizations like Military Warriors Support Foundation. And it's great Americans that step in knowing you don't have to wear that uniform to serve. Service to country, service to others is giving more than you're taking. Leave things better than what you showed up with it as. I can't thank each and every one of you enough for allowing me to share this and being part of this morning and this opportunity. I don't know how much, we still got some time. I wanted to, leave the last little bit because I love to have conversations. And use this opportunity to open it up to you guys for any questions that you might have, anything I can throw my 2 cents on, let you pick my brain, let us have a conversation. So if any of you have any questions, feel free.
Hello. Okay, there we go. Got it. There's just a lot of people here from the metal industry and lots of unique industries. And can you speak to who might be interested in hiring veterans and some of the qualities and why they should considering veterans to bring on to their company?
Hiring and veteran employment opportunities, especially in the industry of the trades, the skills. For me personally, there's not one perfect size that fits all. Like I said, I was never going to go to college. So I'm a huge advocate of let's get more introduced to the skills, the trades. But for veterans, and these are things I didn't realize when I transitioned and went work in oil field. Like I thought to myself, who the heck wants to hire a 19 Delta that can shoot expert with a weapon? I can do some route reconnaissance. I can land nav. I can throw a 60-pound ruck on my back and go up and down mountains. Those are all skills that I'm like, well, I could probably be a mall security cop at best. But it's all those skills that you take for granted in the military. It's the attention to detail, following rules and regulation, being a team player, wanting to make all those around you better. Having initiative in the absence of orders. Waking up and showing up to work on time. Apparently that's difficult nowadays, I guess, for some. It's all of those intangibles. And even as I got to thinking of it, like when you're first exposed to military service, said we all come from our little different pockets of the US. Like I said, I was raised in a tiny town in Northern California, lived there for 18 years before I joined the Army. Like that's what I knew of America, was my family and my sphere of influence. But then all of a sudden I found myself at Fort Knox, Kentucky with a roommate from San Antonio, Texas, that I thought was sneaking chocolate bars every night going to bed because I'd never smelled cocoa butter before in my life. And he would lotion up before going to bed. And you learn how to meet other Americans from other different places in the world or in the US. And you learn how they interact. And you learn how to be tactful. And you learn, like that is such an interesting soft skill, because you guys are gonna hate me, because in the oil field I did transition to safety. So I was a safety guy for a while. And that's what they really liked, was the fact that you had that tactfulness to understand how to talk to everybody else. That also came from one of the greatest leadership lessons I learned as a young PFC in the Army from a great leader of mine, Sergeant Garriottis, that told me great leaders are the ones that change their leadership style to fit all those beneath them. The crappy leaders are the ones that expect everybody to change to their ways. Those are what you get by hiring veterans and actively going after and seeking them out and recruiting them. But those are also what we have to do as veterans, to go out and promote our skills that we have. It's so easy. I've seen it so many times. Veterans go do a job interview and they talk about how great their team was. Well, I want to hire your team. I don't want to hire you then. And we've got to be kind of selfish as veterans too. We do really good work. We have a lot of skills that are very desirable. And I think the industries are coming around and noticing that. But we can't just settle for what we have. We always got to keep improving.
Fabulous presentation. You have kids. Tell us what the plans are for your kids and the military.
So my kids, like I said, we have 6 between the two of us. 3 boys, 3 girls. And we do have a dog named Alice. So you guys watch the Brady Bunch, you get that one. For me, if any of my kids have the desire to serve, I'm going to tell them exactly what my dad did. I will encourage them, but it's going to be their choice. It's been great to see, like I said, my oldest daughter, she's pursuing a bachelor's now in forensic biology. Our oldest son, like I said, he's following the skills, going to HVAC, heating and cooling. Our next oldest daughter is thinking about going to cosmetology school. Being a recipient of the Medal of Honor is something I'll never forget. It is one of those chapters in my life that is very important. But really my true defining moment, I'm just going to be just tickled to death if all 6 of our kids grow up and become just productive members of this society. And they're doers and they're givers and not takers. That is where that's my high success in life. And if I can raise those 6 kids to give back more than they take and contribute and make tomorrow better than today, that is going to be my defining moment of my life. And I'm so looking forward to that one day.
So you slipped up and let us know you were involved in safety, and we appreciate that. What I want to hear, though, is in your years of experience, how have you seen the safety atmosphere change, both in the military and in construction?
So what I noticed in the oil fields and even in the military, it's truly that relationship that when you instill a culture, because especially in the military, that's what I could tell people is duty's going to get my guys to do their job. But if they know I actually give a crap about them and I'm looking out for their best interest, and that builds loyalty, and that'll get them to go above and beyond anything that's just required of their 9-to-5 work or job description. In the oil fields, I noticed that too, that it was, and I mean, at the end of the day, it also comes down to financials. I would much rather shut a job down and wait for the right piece of equipment to get there and hold it up and suck up a $100,000 bill than I would to pay out $1 million death lawsuit. But the intent was always still building that relationship to genuinely show you. I'm really trying not to cuss sometimes. I don't know if you guys can notice that. That if you truly give a shit about someone, they just perform so much better. And the industry, I've noticed, has been changing because they truly care. They truly want to make the environment better, and it's through the cultural mindset that we can't rush to failure. As we used to say when we do our convoy operations over in Iraq, you have the whole rest of your life to get there. How fast do you want to rush it? You know, I don't think anybody's messed up by taking a step back and giving something a second look. I think that as a society, though, is something we're still continuing to work on and improve. But I got to see it firsthand in the military, like I said, in the oil field that I worked at, that when they said you had stop work authority, not just as a safety guy, but they truly embraced that. And they realized, yeah, they would rather spend the extra money to bring in that extra piece of equipment to do it a little safer and shut the job down for half a day than it was to rush and have a crane tip over again or a massive spill or something. It's still something we need to improve, but I can definitely see the cultural mindset shifting.
Maybe directed to you or those that you know, but what is one of the biggest struggles for veterans returning to civilian lifestyle?
Some of the biggest struggles our veterans having returning to civilian, like I said, there's a multitude of things. Again, there's not one size fits all. The thing I've noticed the most, though, is that loss of identity, that loss of purpose, that loss of teamhood, camaraderie, the brotherhood. Said a lot of the guys I had that got out, that especially like went to college right after service, their first complaint was, man, it sucks being in this college course. And I'm sitting here with these 18, 19-year-old kids bitching about how tough their life is. And I just got back from a 15-month deployment to Iraq. That was very tough for them to be in an environment where they couldn't kind of reconnect back with the veterans, or especially the guys they served. I mean, I can tell you to this day what Sergeant Rasmussen's feet still smell like. Like, we lived together so close for so long, and some of those conditions, you build such a tight brotherhood and bond that all of a sudden it's kind of stripped away and you lose that identity. And it's understanding that, again, just because you've taken the uniform off doesn't mean someone's not going to have your six. It doesn't mean you're done serving or you're going to be cast aside. For me, my transition, because I was working the oil field and driving 76 miles one way to work and 76 miles back, every morning I had the opportunity, and every night, to call one of the guys I served with and just BS with them for just a couple hours or a couple of minutes to maybe an hour on the drive. Just those little micro reconnections really helped me figure out what was next in life and still have that plug back in. And that's what a lot of veterans struggle with when they are having a hard time, is finding where they fit back in. We also, as veterans, and I'm gonna say this, we have an issue in some of our veteran communities with this sense of entitlement that we are just owed shit just because we were veterans. I don't believe that at all. I think the only thing we owe our veterans is the opportunities to prove themselves. That there are so many veterans that can do so much better, but they shouldn't just be given it just to be given it. They should be given the opportunity to prove it. Because time and time again, they will. And when they can find their fit back in, and find their new community and find their next purpose. That's also why I also like the skills, the trades. Because a lot of veterans go into employment and they end up getting a job and not a career. But for the trades, even if you're not finding a career, every day you can look back. That's what I loved about working with my hands. I could look back every day and said, I did exactly this. I produced exactly this. So I hated growing up on that farm, on that family farm. Because like I said, it just sucked digging fence posts and stretching wire and milking cows and take care of it. But every day I got to look, at the end of the day, I could look back and say, I put in a 1/4 mile of fencing there. I moved these cows over there and we had to pull 3 calves that were hung up during calving season. The sense of pride you get when you work with your hands and you actually produce something tangible that puts a roof over someone's head, that puts lights on inside their house, that makes their toilet flush. There's something to me deep down in my soul that provides so much, especially with veterans who have a tendency to already be service-minded and giving. That's why I really like to fit into the trades and into the purpose and into the community for the next step and the next level.
First, thank you for your service. Touch briefly on leadership. What have you learned from your own experiences and other people close to you, and how do you kind of implement now that into everyday life?
Well, that's, the everyday life and the leadership lessons I learned in the military, again, is another great point of why hiring veterans is very important too. So I learned so much about leadership in the military just through observation that you didn't even really know. And the military is one of those career paths that literally the military has structured leadership courses built in throughout. So great leadership lessons I ever learned. Like the best leaders, they always led from the front. They never asked you to do something that they hadn't already done or weren't willing to do right alongside you. It's so much easier to follow someone when you know they got the skin in the game and you can see them doing what they're asking you to do. Another great leadership lesson I said goes back to, like I said, Hungary aunties about changing your leadership style to address those underneath you, and it goes back to building that relationship. My other favorite one was, really from my dad, where, if you're going to be stupid, you better be tough. Those leadership, I've learned more from my failures than I ever did from my successes. And I think good leaders also understand, and you can carry it in, into civilian life, mistakes are some of the greatest things we can make. I tell my guys all the time, you get one. I'm not going to crucify you for making a mistake, just don't make it twice. Because you learn way more from your mess ups than you ever do from your successes. And the mentality I think we've kind of gotten into, we expect everybody to be perfect and squeaky clean. It's just an impossibility. We're not perfect. Give people the opportunity to fail, but give them the grace for the forgiveness and a path forward for success. Those are all the great leadership lessons I learned that I'm hoping I convey to my kids. The other big one, because they take my tools all the time, is put them back the way you found them. Put them back in better condition than you got them. You're going to go borrow the lawnmower, put fuel back in it. That was always a big one, especially for my dad. If you borrow anything, you use anything from anybody else, give it back in better condition than you got it. Again, I think we're almost wrapped up on time. I appreciate it. Everyone coming to join today. It's been an honor, privilege, and a blessing. God bless each and every one of you so very much for your time, for your attention, and try to make tomorrow better than today. We're showing up for tomorrow. We can change that. We can't change our past. We can learn from it. We can experience it. We can reflect on it. But let's try to make tomorrow better than today. If you guys wouldn't mind, we have the absolute privilege to do our ribbon cutting ceremony at, what's it, just in front of here where you see this big, beautiful steel construction building set up that will be donated to the Military Wars Support Foundation for peer-to-peer counseling at a location up in Montana. Barndominium has been so kind as to donate this 2,900 square foot facility to again help veterans find out what's next, help warriors heal warriors. And again, it is because of opportunities and service back to our veterans through stuff like this that I know we are living in one of the greatest times in human history. We're living in the greatest nation mankind has ever known. So without further ado, we would start making our way to the front of the metal frame building back here. Shortly, we'll have the ceremonial ribbon cutting.